Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about radish pests. So we're getting near the end of the fall radish harvest right now, and the pest pressure is not as strong as it is in the spring, but there are still radish pests that we need to be concerned about. So I want to go over those now, and then also just have this kind of like top 5 cheat sheet ready for next year, because next year these bugs are still going to be in the soil. So we need to just chat about them and be ready to defend against them. So radishes grow really quick. They're one of the fastest fruits and vegetables. You have a harvest within 30 days-ish of planting it. So that's really good, but that means that they're very susceptible to pest pressure early on. They've got a lot of growing they need to do. So if pests are there eating and taking their nutrients, you're not going to have the radish bulb and root form the way it should, the way we want to eat it. So I just want to go over a few things to kind of help us there. The most common pest is flea beetles, and they are most susceptible, injuring your little radish seedlings between weeks 1 and 3, while the new growth is really tender and the plant really can't afford to be giving up its nutrients because it needs to start developing that root bulb in the final week. So these are tiny, shiny, black little beetles. They jump like fleas when you come near them. That's why they're called flea beetles. So how do we protect against them? Row covers is one option. So you can put row covers on after planting. Another option is to plant trap crops like mustard or arugula. Both of those will draw flea beetles away. They'd rather eat those than your radishes. So that's kind of what you're attempting to do there. And then the last thing is to keep your soil moist. Radishes, again, are very fast growing, so they need a lot of nutrients. Water is a nutrient. So get them their water, and they're less stressed. And just like people, when you're less stressed, you're less likely to get sick or be susceptible to predation. So that's what the radishes do. When they're healthy, they are able to fight off those flea beetle infestations a little bit better. So the next one we'll go over is root maggots. So unlike the flea beetles that attack the leaves, the root maggots actually attack the root and make the radish inedible. So these are hard to see until you go and pull the radish up in the fall or when you're harvesting it at the end of the season. And you don't notice it until you slice into your radish and see all sorts of brown mush and tunnels and larvae growing through it, making it completely inedible and unfit to eat. Quite disgusting. Given that it's hard to notice before you get this, really the only visible sign is you might see the plants wilting, even though it's got enough moisture, as these larvae and maggots have completely destroyed the root infrastructure and is killing the plant. So how do you prevent these? Crop rotation is your best bet. So you want to get these into a new area of the soil where the larvae aren't even there to predate on them. It's not like these little larvae aren't like people. They can't get in a car and go over a field. It takes them a long time to get places. So simply rotating your crops help a lot. You can try netting again, but the problem is you don't necessarily know when these are going to strike as easily. So the last option is, if you're not interested in doing netting or rotating your crops, is you can get beneficial nematodes that destroy the larvae before they attack the roots, and that can help put some natural pressure on this predator of your radishes. And those work. They're just a little bit more difficult to master. Crop rotation really is your best bet on this one. After root maggots come aphids. Look at all those guys under that radish leaf. So what these guys do is they just suck the energy right out of the plant. They're sitting there sucking all the sap out of it and really making it so your plant is unthrifty and can't survive, or just produces a really tiny fruit, vegetable root. So aphids leave a sticky residue called honeydew, which then further attracts ants to your plant, and also can lead to disease growth like mold on the leaves. Ladybugs are a great way to prevent against these guys. They come in and just munch on them. They eat 20, 30, 40 of them a day. So you're really getting rid of a lot of aphids if you can attract some ladybugs into your garden. So that's part of integrated pest management, is where you're trying to do things to bring in the good guys to help mitigate the bad guys on your crop. So beneficial insects, ladybugs, lacewings, they're good guys. Bring them into your garden. You can do that by planting dill, fennel, yarrow. Those are all things that bring those guys to your garden. The next thing is, if your pest pressure is high from aphids, is you can spray a little insecticidal soap or neem oil, both of which disrupt the hormones of aphids and prevent their life cycle from continuing. One thing to avoid with aphids is too much nitrogen. Nitrogen fertilizer causes that fresh green growth that then the aphids can more easily suck the energy and sap and create the honeydew out of. So don't use too much nitrogen. That will help you out a lot. Slugs. So now your radish is just about ready to harvest and you've got slugs coming and munching on it. What you can do to prevent slugs is to put beer traps out. So the yeast in the beer traps attracts the slugs. They go and drink the beer and they drown. So flat little containers, like a tuna can or something like that. Something that's low, but you can put a little bit of liquid in the very bottom. That beer will draw them in and they'll drown there. There are some beetles that will also be attracted to that, and that they're not necessarily a bad guy. So that's one thing to just kind of watch, is if you're killing a lot of mediocre guys in your garden and not getting any slugs, the beer traps might not be worth it. Another way to keep slugs down is to clean up your garden. So they live under mulch, debris, weeds. So if you keep those hiding spots out, they're not going to be very functional in your garden. They're not going to be able to be there to do much damage. Diatomaceous earth also works. That's just something you got to apply multiple times. I suppose beer traps, you have to keep those filled too. So a little bit of ongoing maintenance with diatomaceous earth. The last one is cutworms, and these go ahead and attack the baby radishes right as they first come up, and it saws them off right at the bottom. There's no surviving from this killer. And they can take out a lot in one night. The best way to prevent them is to try and keep them from climbing up the stalk. So you can use cardboard collars. Also, minimizing the mulch early on, which is a spot for these guys to hide, is helpful. The last thing you can do is go out and hand pick them. So at night you can find them. When you come up to them and disturb them, they're going to curl into a C really quick, and you can just toss them into a bowl of soapy water. That will finish them off, or you can just put them in regular water and go feed them to your chickens afterwards. They love this proteinaceous snack. All right, so now that we've discussed all of the pests, or the main pests, and how to handle them, let's talk about your best strategy, and that is prevention. The best way to do this is to have a healthy garden that the pests don't even want to come to in the first place. How do you do that? So we've got organic radish control pest methods that work. Physical barriers, so those row covers I talked about. You can use those in the beginning to keep out the flea beetles and also the root maggots. You can encourage natural predators with dill, fennel, and yarrow, and those bring in the ladybugs to kill the aphids. Soil and crop practices, that's rotating yearly, keeping the soil loose, well drained, having cover crops. Healthy soil prevents fewer pest outbreaks. And then finally, if you need to, you can go to some organic sprays and detergents like neem oil and insecticidal soap, or beer traps and copper strips to keep out your pests. Those all work pretty well. So when you get into it next year, just remember there are steps that you can take that help. Rotate your crops, row covers, checking daily to make sure the pest pressure doesn't get too high, and coming in with action when it does get high, picking them off, spraying the soaps. And then finally, encouraging those beneficial insects to help you and taking out your diseased and infested plants so they can't continue harboring the pests or even spreading them. Those are your best bets for prevention. So if you saw up here, I've got a quick cheat sheet that you can look at that covers the top 4 pests. Cutworms aren't on here. This is a bit of a promotional material for the post. So no cutworms on here. Here are the top 4 though, and how to identify them, and a quick blurb on how to help prevent them. So I hope this was useful to all of you, and you have a great day. Take care.